raccoon.
Don't call me a raccoon!
I'm sorry. I took it too far. I meant trash panda.
Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today's build's a bit different. No, not in terms of what I'm making or how I'm making, but why I'm making. The intent of my channel has always been for me to share my process and hopefully spread some creativity, making it easier for others to express themselves. And over the past couple of months, it's been difficult. I've lost 3 family members in 4 months. I've dealt with a couple of other family crises and some work issues. So I've been in kind of a funk, a little bit of a depression. And the last 2 videos are definitely things that I'm trying to work through. The outcry from the people in that comment section have been awesome. It's really to help me move through some stuff that I'm trying to get mentally past. And I had a Patreon member, the Trash Panda, reach out to me a few weeks ago asking if he could send me something. He lives in Australia, and it is a long way from the small town in Texas that I live. So I was like, you don't have to do that. I appreciate just the comments and the Patreon membership and all that. And he's like, no, I want to send you something. So I was like, okay. So I gave him my P.O. box and his package came. Him and his son sat down and made some resin dice for me in the Much Props colors. They're awesome. I was truly blown away by the kindness, the letter. I cried. It was I'm not going to tell you exactly what was in it, but basically the overview is he appreciates what I do on the channel, and him and his son have spent some quality time building some of the things that I've made. When you set out to do something, you never know really the intent of how it's going to be perceived. For some people, it may just be entertainment or background noise, but the connections that it makes with others is truly moving to me, and it's something that keeps me fueled and keeps me going. So I thought it would be pertinent to make a proper holding container for these awesome dice. That is the purpose of this video. And because the Trash Panda and Mini Panda made this for me, I thought it'd only be fitting to make something raccoon related and D&D related. So that's the purpose. Let's make a cool set of dice holder thingy-majiggers to put this in. Yeah, let's get to building. So like I said in the intro, these dice were sent to me by a Patreon member from Australia named the Trash Panda and Mini Panda. I have tried my hand at resin casting before, and I know it's no easy task to get it right. There are no bubbles, there's cool swirls in the color mix, they have a nice weight to them, and the recessed letters were hand painted, so I know a lot of time went into making these. If you're unfamiliar with the term Trash Panda, it's referring to a raccoon. I thought it would be a real cool idea to make the sculpt related to both the subject of the objects and the sender profile name. So I'm going to sculpt a raccoon wizard in some polymer clay, then mount it to a base that will hold the dice inside. I am by no means a polymer expert and very much rely on YouTube makers like North of the Border, Ace of Clay, The Craftsman, Zan Von Zed, and several others for tips. I bulk the body with foil and smush the clay around it. have a bunch of sculpting tools, but typically find myself primarily using my hands for a majority of the time and only actually 3 or 4 bits from that pile. I'm gonna try to get the basic shape and some texture on the sculpt before I bake it. What's really nice is that you can bake it multiple times throughout the process to help lock in details that you don't want to mess up later. I try to establish a majority of the body, then bake it in the oven for 20 minutes at whatever that box says. I think it's 275 degrees Fahrenheit. I always forget how quickly you can piece together a build with polymer clay. Carved in foam or things like that, this would probably take me a day or two to do, but total time spent sculpting this build I think was about 2 hours. I'm not going to be too precious with this sculpt trying to get things smooth because I know that the fur will cover up my lack of expertise in polymer. I have a little wire tool that has a couple of wire bristles that will make quick work of adding nice surface texture to the parts I want. Once I add these scratches into the clay, I bake it. In total, I probably bake the sculpt 5 or 6 times. I went looking outside for the perfect wizard staff in my yard and could not find something small enough with a variation in structures that I wanted, so I'm just going to make it from this twig as a base. Then add polymer clay to the top of it. I rough it up to give the glue and the clay something to grab to, drill a hole to super glue in a support wire, and then just mush the clay over the top of it. I think I'm going to keep it simple and not add a gem, but you could easily sculpt around a glass bead or some temper resistant thing, or leave a void and glue in a decorative thing later. I need to get the size of the handle now for the staff down so that I can sculpt my hand around it now. I'm trying to hit the high points with this sculpting, and I realize that my hands are ginormous, covering up most of the work in this video, but when you are a one-man show, sometimes the cameraman can't get the proper angle. Usually it falls to crafting man or the video editor to try and make it look right, and sometimes it just doesn't. Here I'm making this hat. I bulk out the middle with some more of that foil, and then use the texture off of a piece of a strap to imprint onto the hat. Once again, trying to cover up my lack of smoothing abilities. When it gets to the shape I want, I peel it back, put down some Bacon Bond polymer glue, and then fasten it to his head. You see a piece of foil under the brim of his hat here. That was just to help the clay keep its shape and not droop while it was baking. Here I'm adding the hands and the feet to the build. You drill a hole to allow the wire to poke through, add more of that Bacon Bond sculpting glue onto any areas that the baked clay meets the unbaked clay, then transition the parts between them. The big block of wood in the background has holes in it that I used as a stand to hold my hands and feet while I baked them. I didn't record the tail for some reason, but it's pretty much the same steps as the hands and the feet, with more of that foil and wire to bulk it out. The ears, I had to carve back a place in the clay for them to nestle into. I guess you could just plop them on the top, but by doing it this way, it kind of further secures the ears into the head and allows the edges to look like they had to be cut out to give ears a passway through the hat. So my wizard trash panda is all baked and done, but I did have a couple of unwanted cracks in places that either were too thin or bumped up against something or got overheated in the multiple bakes. To patch this up, you could use a number of different methods. I am going to use the tried and true super glue and baby powder mix. It's fast, cheap, and ready to move on in a couple of seconds. Mix a little powder into some super glue, then scrape it into the cracks or holes. Once I had it fully filled, I added a little fur texture with the tip of my hobby knife before it solidified to blend it in almost flawlessly. I hit the raccoon and the staff with a flat gray primer to prepare the surface for acrylic paints. While the primer dries, I decided to switch over to the base build. I need a small container that was sturdy enough to hold up a heavy little trash panda nugget. The hobby store in my city has these cheaply made wood products that I've used from time to time. They're pretty rough, but can save me a little bit of time trying to make it myself. So I chopped off the bottom with a saw and then sanded it close to being even. It's not, but it's okay. And then removed the hinge. I don't need it, as the sculpt once secured to the lid will probably make it too heavy and bend the hinge off of the base. Initially, I had planned to drill in some holes into the wood to hold it with some magnets, but the cylinder is not anywhere close to being even on the outside. It's not even a circle. I decided instead to just put strips of foam snug on the inside and let it have a friction fit closed. I round over the corners where the foam and the wooden lid will meet and then super glue the foam into place. I also glued down a piece of foam on the bottom to cushion the dice so that when they're sitting inside the container, they're protected. For the top of my container, I am going to do a quick and easy terrain. Since the raccoon will take up a majority of the surface, you don't need a whole lot of detail in this groundwork. I first Mod Podged down some ballast, this brown stuff that typically you use on like train sets, I guess. I got a bunch of model terrain stuff this past trip at my hobby store on clearance rack. Definitely the first place I go every time I look in the hobby stores. This will save me some time having to sift out dirt from the outside and dry it and pull out bugs and other random bits that I don't want. I am putting down the dirt layer just so that if there are any patches of the static grass that are uncovered, you'll see ballast instead of the wood. Static grass is a fun thing to mess around with. This contraption charges the faux grass with static and then sprinkled onto the glue causes the blades to stand up like real grass. The little probe helps to raise up the areas around it. Once the grass is to the fullness that I want, I go over the top of the grass with some watered down Mod Podge and lock it all into place. Make sure when you're using this static grass applicator that you turn it off before scooping out the excess because it will shock the mess out of you. Just ask my wife who came in running when I yelped really loud because I forgot to hit that switch. As far as the rest of the base, I'm just gonna stain the wood black. Why am I using leather dye? Because I can, so mind your business. You can paint it with whatever you want. A number of different things on this surface would be fine, but since my box of scenic stuff also contains my leather and gilding stuff, it was already out and readily accessible. I wipe the surface with the stain swab and then wipe off the excess with a paper towel. You can still see the grain on the wood, which I like, but it's not enough to distract from the focus of the top. Now it's time to paint my trash panda. I start by pushing black acrylic paint into all the crevices and those textures and then wipe away the high points. As that dries, then I move on to dry brushing over all those textured areas with various shades of gray, brown, and white. I hand paint on the typical eye pattern as well as the pattern on his tail, and then paint the hat and the staff in a similar fashion. I am ready to glue him to the base, so I am just going to try to secure him with some hot glue. Since the base with the resin dice is so light, I don't think it'll be an issue as long as I'm careful when picking it up. I had a big spot opposite of his tail that I thought needed something. I had some plastic trash bits from a previous build that I wanted to use, but they're the wrong scale, they were way too small, so I thought I would build a quick spell book. I took pages out of a cheap aged sketch book that I got on Amazon on a sale and decided to cut it into smaller pieces to make a miniature version of it, basically. I glue the edges of one side with hot glue, then hot glue the stack to a strip of leather. I added the mustached logo that you saw on the inside of my gift box from the Trash Panda and Mini Panda, just drawing it on with a Sharpie and then gluing it next to my raccoon on the ground. I also took a little glass charm that my mother had made and turned it into an enchanted medallion with a little bit of paint and leather cording. I glued some more of that leather cord around the hat and then glued a laser cut Much Props logo onto the front of his hat. With that, this build is officially done. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty cool. I think all the little details definitely helped to pull it together, and it serves its purpose of holding these epic dice. It's a little bigger than it needed to be. I could also put other things in here to also be related to my D&D adventures. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, the Trash Panda and Mini Panda. They'll definitely get put to good use, and it'll be a constant reminder of the generosity of people. Truly, the most easiest thing that you could possibly do is share a video or like it or leave a comment. Those things help to push makers forward and keep them motivated to do what they do. Same goes for just everybody. Be kind to a stranger, be kind to a friend, say hello to somebody that you've never talked to. It doesn't take you going out of your way to spend a lot of money. The most valuable thing you can give somebody is your time. So, yeah. Inevitably, somebody's going to ask you how you made that. You can give them one of these, tell them, much props. Now time to go start a campaign with this epic wizard as the protagonist. Peace out.
If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.